一如既往，诵念经文之前，我们一起静心聆听善知识的佛法分享。今晚的佛法分享者将会是以英语讲解，并配上中文字幕，方便大家的学习。阿弥陀佛 brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. Before proceeding to our Dhamma sharing for tonight, let me introduce to you our presenter, Sister Xuan B. Sister Xuan B was a registered nurse and midwife. She was graduated with Bachelor of Degrees with honor in Buddhist and Pali from University of Sri Lanka. She had also obtained her master degrees of arts in Buddhist studies from International Buddhist College. She is now a teacher assistant in IBC as well as coordinator for IBCM Diploma in Buddhist Studies at Tansiang. The topic which is going to be covered by Sister Xuan B shortly is about the travels of Chinese pilgrims, Faxian, Xuan, and Yijing. Let's put our palms together to learn from Sister Xuan B.
Nam mô Bổn Sư Thích Ca Mâu Ni Phật. Nam mô Bổn Sư Thích Ca Mâu Ni Phật. Nam mô Bổn Sư Thích Ca Mâu Ni Phật. Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone is fine. Now, this is the first Dharma talk for the new year 2024. So here's wishing everyone a happy and peaceful New Year. Okay, this evening, I would like to share with you the journey and dedication of the Chinese pilgrims, in particular, Faxian, Xuan, and Yijing, who traveled from China to India to look for the Buddhist scripture. So, okay, I will read through the slide, and you can follow the Chinese translation at the bottom of the page. And then later I will explain page by page. So, okay, when Buddhism flourished in China, there was a need for Buddhist texts, as there was some discrepancy in the translation work. The Chinese monk ventured to go to India and bring back this sacred material. And some of the monks used the overland route through Central Asia to India. Others took the sea route via the Southeast Asian port. Some of the monks returned to China after their pilgrimage. Many others decided to stay in India, or they died before they could return to China. So why did the monk go to India in spite of all this hardship? When Buddhism was transmitted to China during the Han Dynasty by monks, missionaries, and merchants of Central Asia and North India, that was the beginning of Buddhism in China. And actually, before I go further, let me point out the location of Central Asia in the world map, because it is quite difficult to understand where Central Asia is. And I will be mentioning Central Asia quite a number of times. So Central Asia is the central part of the Asian continent, meaning being in the center, it is surrounded by China in the east, Russia in the north, Afghanistan and Iran in the south. So today the term is referred to the region of the Islamic states like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. And these are the 5 new states that formed from the old Silk routes. And Xinjiang belongs to part of China. So actually this area is Central Asia, which I'm going to mention a number of times in my talk tonight, okay? So, so when the monks started to study Buddhism in China, there were questions that linked to Buddhism that needed explanation. And this prompted the monk to go and search for the original texts that were missing in China. And India, being the land of the Buddha, became the reference point for them to visit. So some of the Chinese monks were so sentimental with the Buddhist sites in India and monastic institution that they decided not to return to China. In fact, very few Chinese monks returned to China. So we go on to the next slide. So Faxian, Xuan, and Yiqing were among hundreds of Chinese monks who left China and returned with records of their journey. Their written accounts are the only available writing describing the condition of Buddhism and the Buddhist site, which have been of great value to historians and archaeologists for the information that it contains. Additionally, this account also throws light on the dangerous journey of the long-distance travel experienced by the travelers. So Faxian, Xuan, and Yiqing were among hundreds of Chinese monks who made their journey to India and also beyond. So these three names were mentioned in history, for they were more famous than the others because, why? Because of their written account of their travel, which was very detailed, it was very accurate and authentic. So people remember them among the hundreds of monks who traveled to India. So these records today are the only available writing describing Buddhism, the Buddhist site, and the difficulty of the travel that they experience. So we will go on to the next slide and study the first pilgrim, Faxian. So Faxian, 337, means he was born in 337, passed away 422. From the calculation, he lived for 85 years. And he was the first Chinese Buddhist monk who took 5 years to walk from Chang'an across Central Asia to India. After spending 6 years in India, he sailed to Sri Lanka, another great Buddhist country, where he spent 2 years. His homeward journey by sea took another year, in which he stopped for 5 months in Java. So his entire journey took 15 years. So returning to China, he devoted the rest of his life to translating the Buddhist texts from Sanskrit to Chinese language. And he described his journey in his travel account, a record of the Buddhist kingdom, which is an account related to the monastic life and pilgrimage sites that he visited. So Faxian was the first Chinese monk to make his journey at about 60 years of age, 60 years. The reason he went to India was to learn more about the Vinaya. The Vinaya is a Pali word. This is the rules that regulate the life of the monk, or you can say this is the code of discipline practiced by the monk. Okay, and because Faxian were not satisfied with the incomplete training practiced in China, the other reason, of course, is to study Buddhism, to learn more about Buddhism and locate sutra that were not available in China. So his whole journey took 15 years. So he wrote down his account, the records of the Buddhist kingdom, where he described the Buddhist practices in India and the pilgrimage site of 27 kingdoms that he passed through when Buddhism was influential in areas that he visited. So if you look at the dates he traveled compared to Xuan, who visited the same area at the later stage in the 7th century, Buddhism was at a period of decline. And therefore, you can feel the sadness in Xuanzang's writing about the places that he visits. Okay, Faxian is more lucky or blessed. Okay, he seems to receive more support from the rulers of the state that he passed through. But during his travel, there was no transport facilities and there was no public transport. So he has to cross through deserts and mountains of Central Asia, and this presents difficulty for him. So we can tell from the passage that he wrote in his account in the next slide. The next slide. Okay, this is the passage that Faxian wrote. He said, there is snow both in winter and summer. There is wind, rain, drifting sand, and gravel stone. The road is difficult and broken, with steps, cracks, and precipices along the way. The mountainside is simply a stone wall, standing up to 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters. On going forward, there is no sure foothold. This is from Faxian's account. So I put a picture here. If you look at the picture, you look at the road. It's not paved road. They're stone, gravel. So there's a danger that you may fall down. You may fall. If you step on a stone, you may fall down the cliff. Or the top of the mountain, the rocks may fall down on your head. Okay, and the road is not paved. So this is the dangerous journey that the merchants, the missionaries, and the pilgrims have to travel. So you also find this kind of description in Xuanzang's account. He also faced the same thing. So when Faxian traveled along the Silk Road, he has to cross deserts and mountains. Faxian was quite advanced in his age when he traveled, but he never looked back, even though others have died or gave up. And he was the first to finish his entire journey, and he was the first to write about his experience of 15 years in his travel. So he met many dangers, but overcome all of it. And the text that he brought back was safe. And he translated all of it. Okay, so we go on to the next slide, Xuanzang. This is another Chinese pilgrim, Xuanzang, born in 602, passed away 664. And that will make him, from the calculation, 62 years. Okay, so Xuanzang started his journey to India at age younger, 27, traveling overland following the Silk Road as well. He traveled on foot, in caravan, on horseback, or camel to Central Asia, and then to India. And his travel took him 16 years. He mentioned several Buddhist sites in Central Asia. An example, in Khotan, Khotan is one of the oasis states. He said, in Khotan, the system of writing was found to have been taken from that of India. The people there were Buddhists, and there were about hundreds monasteries with over 5,000 priests. Priests, he meant monk, chiefly Mahayanis. So Xuanzang's purpose of traveling to India was to learn the original doctrine from the Indian teachers physically there, okay? And he visited the Buddhist site in India. His whole journey was through the land route. So he was able, for that reason, he was able to visit more sites and bring back more scripture. Traveling on Central Asia actually is very common. It is a very common practice to hitchhike on the merchants' caravan with the traders, or go on horse or camel along the Taklamakan Desert in the Tarim Basin. So in his case, he gave a unique account of the Silk Road, cities, and the religious life of the Central Asian, which came in useful for us today to interpret the Buddhist landscape of Central Asia at that time that he visited. For example, he said in Khotan is an oasis kingdom, desert kingdom during his time. Xuan Zang told us how the Indian influenced Khotan, because he said that Khotan used a modified version of the Indians' writing. They used the Indian writing, Indian script. And then Mahayana Buddhism was flourishing there with 100 monasteries and 5,000 monks. So you see from his account, we get a lot of information. Okay. So the next slide, continue with Xuan Zang. Xuan Zang took back a corpus of Buddhist texts and translated 77 texts into Chinese. He wrote his book, The Great Tang Record of the Western Region, and this is a classic Chinese literature which later served as an inspiration for the epic story Journey to the West. So for Xuan Zang, as for India, he brought back over 700 Buddhist texts and also provided us with an account of the urban life of the Indian, the caste system, the 4 caste system of the Brahmin. He studied Sanskrit there and was one of the great translators of Buddhist texts from Sanskrit to Chinese. And 1/4 of the translation of the Chinese Buddhist texts were actually done by him. So there were many other translators like Kumarajiva, Anshikao, and so on. Okay, but he translated 1/4 of the Chinese text. So his travel account, the record of the Western region, is about the people and the land he passed through. So you find that in the epic story, Journey to the West, some of you may have seen, may have read the story. This is based on the real life events that Xuan Zang faced in his travel through Central Asia. And some of the version you may have read added the Monkey King, Sun Wukong, in the story as well. Okay, so Xuan Zang has been quite famous. Now we go on to the third pilgrim, Yijing. Now Yijing, born 635, passed away 713. So that will make him 73 years old. He lived for 73 years. Okay, so Yijing took to the sea route to India and back. He never traveled through Central Asia, and his travel covered the period of 24 years, in which he spent 10 years studying in Nalanda and 10 years in Srivijaya, which is Indonesia or Sumatra, translating the scripture. So he wrote, from Indonesia, he wrote records of the inner law sent home from the South Sea. And this is a detailed account of how Buddhist doctrine and monastic rules were practiced in India. So Yijing did not use the land route, but he used the sea route all the way. So in ancient time, there were actually 2 trade routes, land and sea. This monk could not travel by themselves, but usually they follow the traders in the ship, caravan, or walk in groups. The sea route can be more convenient, but there are, of course, danger as well, like Central Asia. Okay, so sea route also has danger, like pirates. Okay, you can meet pirates, or if there's a disease on the ship, everybody will get it, and so on. Okay, so the reason for Yijing to travel is to learn or study more about Buddhism. So he visited the Nalanda University in India. And he also visited Srivijaya in Indonesia and praised the Buddhists in Srivijaya. And how Buddhism, he gave an account of how Buddhism flourished there. Okay, so his account, the records of the inner law sent home from the South Sea, is about the monastic practice in India. He wanted to rectify what the error was practiced in China and in India. Okay, so in the end, he recommended a compromise due to the cultural difference between India and China. For example, the monk in China used chopstick. Okay, Indian monks will use the right hand to eat. But since the monastic rule did not say chopstick is not allowed or prohibited, it means that it can be used in China. Okay, so after he came back, he compromised because he knew about the cultural difference. So he wrote, so the next slide. So actually this is an artist's impression, a drawing of Yixing. So the next slide, another account written by Yixing, memoirs of eminent monk who visited India and the neighboring region in search of the law during the Great Tang Dynasty. This is a biographical information about 56 Chinese monks who traveled to India in spite of the perilous nature of the journey in the later period during the 7th century. So these are short biographies of the monk who did not write any account because Yixing stay with them, know them, he wrote for them. Okay, and these biographies show the desire of the monks to visit the Buddhist site and their study of Buddhism. So I go on to the last slide. Okay, this is more or less a summary. So the detailed account of Chinese pilgrim and the circulation of Buddhist texts play an important role in the cultural interaction between China and India. And okay, I say this because it helps the spread of Buddhism in China. Chinese pilgrims travel to India. At the same time, many Indian masters travel in the opposite direction to China. So there's a two-way travel to spread Buddhism and the circulation of the Buddhist texts. Actually, Bodhidharma, Tamao, was one of them who came from India to China at that period. And then the second bullet, description of the Indian society and its virtuous rulers, the flourishing monastic institution, and the stories of the Buddha and his disciple contributed to a unique perception of India, which elevated the Chinese impression of the Indian society. Now, before this, Chinese has the impression that foreigners are uncivilized, and they sometimes even call them barbarians. Okay, but since they have written this account, their perception of foreigners has changed. And the reason I say this is because when the pilgrims visited India, especially Hsien, he visited India when Buddhism was at the height of flourishing. So when these pilgrims visited India, they were impressed by the lack of capital punishment. There is no decapitation. Okay, not like China. No decapitation means they don't chop off your head for doing something wrong. Okay, there is no corporal punishment. Criminals in India were punished by paying a fine. You do something wrong, you pay a fine. The worst is to have your hands chopped off. So if you steal, okay, this is a very bad punishment. They will chop off your hand. So throughout the country, people do not kill living creatures. They practice non-violence, ahimsa. Okay, they do not drink alcohol because of the precept. So this was the kind of scenario at that time when the Chinese pilgrim visited India, because Buddhism at that time, the Buddhists in India at that time stick to the Buddha's teaching. So they were impressed. The Chinese were impressed, and they changed the perception of the Chinese. So the last bullet, the narrative of Faxian, Xuan and Yiqing make them more famous than other travelers and provided the Chinese Buddhists an opportunity to envision the sacred Buddha land from the writing of the Chinese pilgrim. And this, of course, came in useful at the time when the Chinese Buddhists were searching for, you can say, for the new religion, Buddhism. Okay, so in the next slide, I have actually finished. So thank you very much.
Amitabha, thank you very much, Sister Sundi. We are
Thank
very grateful for your Dhamma sharing tonight, and we look forward to your next sharing soon in upcoming April. 好，通过周碹美居士的分享，我们从中就看到了我们三位祖师法显、玄奘还有义净舍身求法、不畏归途的精神。虽然他们朝圣的时间还有他们经过的路线都不太一样啊，或者是通过陆路或者通过海路，但是他们都有一个共同点，那个共同点呢，就是他们那份坚韧不拔的毅力，还有他们那份为法忘躯的精神，这些都让我们深深的敬佩和感动。同时呢，也时时刻刻的在提醒我们，今日我们有缘读诵的每一部经典，都是得来不易的，都不是理所当然凭空就出现在我们的面前。这些经典都是我们每一位祖师用尽了他们一生的心血去收集和翻译的成果，所以我们应当非常的珍惜这些法宝，感恩因为有祖师们的付出，我们才能够如此幸福的认识到佛陀传授的智慧和法语。